Hi, welcome back for another one of our episodes. And this time around, I want to talk about what you do with your leftovers. So if you've got leftover drips, if you've filled some little silicone molds and never ended up using them, or whether you're just filling your silicone mold for the sake of not wasting your resin, or even if you had larger pieces that you've been able to cut up and use for something else, I wanted to show you something that you can do with it. So that's what we've got today's episode about. All right, so pieces like leftover coasters, we have actually had cut up. And just with a drop saw, circular saw, obviously please be safe if you are using any tools, but you can actually use your tools to cut resin. So I've had some leftover coasters, much like this one, in these colours, little trays. Here's another remnants of a coaster that I didn't end up using for one reason or another. Maybe I didn't like the colour, maybe it was just as a demonstration, or maybe I was just filling my silicone moulds with some leftover resin from larger projects. But I've decided to basically recycle these and pop them back into one of our project boards and basically use them as a fill. And then I'm going to fill this project board and coat it, cover it, fill around with some of our Resi Cast that I've tinted with our Black Abyss, basically our resin black tint. So let's get started. Now when you are cutting resin or breaking resin, please wear gloves or use a cloth so you're protecting your hands, because it does get very sharp. So all of these pieces that we have cut with a drop saw, we've actually lightly sanded back just so they don't have a super sharp edge on them. They end up being almost glass-like with how razor sharp the edges can be, and the same with this guy here. So as I'm going to snap this one, I am actually going to use a cloth on my hands. Sometimes just your plastic nitrile gloves. Obviously the plastic can cut with the resin going through it. So here we go. We'll snap this one in half. And it's pretty easy to snap it when it's thin, but when it's a thicker piece, that's where tools may be needed. So I'm just going to break it up into some smaller pieces, so that way it's going to fit in my channel on my project board. But yes, please be mindful if it's a piece that might shatter or have a lot of fine dust, especially if you're cutting, that appropriate PPE like your gloves, thicker gloves and eyewear, eye protection is necessary. So you can see here that I've now broken a few of the pieces up into sizes that will fit in my channel. By using this method as well with any of your leftovers, you're actually using less resin that you put into your project board too. So you're able to create new pieces without having to actually use as much resin for your next project. I do collect all of my leftovers, and like I said, even if it's just bits of dripping and pieces coming off my mats, like this guy, or whether it's leftovers from molds. So I've etched it up and I've basically used a little scourer. Please make sure you look at our videos. I've shown that in quite a few of our videos, how we do etch up the surface, getting it ready for our next pour. Okay, so now it's literally a matter of me picking and choosing what pieces I want in here and then filling around them. So I'm going to, the aim for this board as well is I want to be able to use the bottom of the board or the top of the board. So when I'm placing some items down, I might place some smaller, funkier little pieces flat on the bottom. So, like I've got a little smiley face mold here, a little star, what was a pendant. So I might place those down and then put pieces that are like this, that are just more like a fill, above those pieces. So they're basically through the center. And when I do fill around them with our Resi Cast, which has got our black tint in it, you won't actually see those, but you'll see some of the remnants of the ones that are flat against the base or some of the items that are out the top side. And basically just sitting some of the colored stuff in. I've got a portion of what was like a candle mold that has a rainbow on it, so I'm going to sit the rainbow side downwards. If I sit it upwards, the only reason I wouldn't sit it upwards in this case is it's actually higher than the height of the timber. And I do aim to sand this back level, so some of the resin items will be poking out and I'll be able to sand them back and have like a cross section of colour. And I don't just want a solid white block showing up because the back of this is a pearl white. So if I put that rainbow downwards, I've got better chance, because that's flat, of still seeing that rainbow colouring on the bottom side of my project board. And then once I've got like the base of it sort of relatively covered with positions of some of my little mould refills, then I'm going to go and fill it in with some of our larger pieces. So when I pop in these pieces, again, I just want to put them into areas that I know will basically fill the space. Almost like a little bit of Tetris going on here. So that way we get as much coverage with these leftover pieces as possible. So the only reason I'm using a riverboard is because I had this framework ready to go. But potentially there's no reason why, especially if you've got a fair bit of leftover resin, you could actually use it on a large piece, like a large furniture piece, or even right down to filling certain little silicone moulds. You could basically fill those up if you were planning on having a unique look inside the mould, or coating the mould first and then just having them as a fill so you don't have to use as much resin. So there's a number of different options. I guess you're only limited to your imagination as to what you want to do with your leftover resin. And the items that I'm not going to use, I'm going to save again for next time. I mean, this resin will last forever, so there's no reason why I can't use these again in another project fill. All right, so as mentioned before, I have pre-mixed our Resi Cast, and the reason I'm using the Resi Cast is because my channel here is over 1.5 centimeters. Otherwise I would usually use Resi Clear, because that can be poured up to 1.5 centimeters, but this one can be poured up to 2 centimeters. Now my channel is obviously filled with most of this resin, so chances are I could potentially have used Clear, but Cast is a safer alternative to go with, so I can make sure I can get that depth in one pour. And I have mixed it up. We have used our Black Abyss tint, and the reason I wanted to use the black as well, because I still wanted to make this somewhat high-end piece. So I still wanted to have it look a little bit classy. So by having solid black, that means that the pops of color that'll poke out from already made pieces of resin will hopefully give it a really unique look and not just like a really ugly mess of old resin pieces. So I'm gonna pop my nitrile gloves on, and we are going to pour around. And being that the resin is fluid, it will seep and make its way under and in and around all of these little pieces, and it will fill all these holes. Now, pretty much filled my channel. So the aim now is to let this cure. With Cast, we are waiting our 2 to 3 sort of days to have this cure completely. But I did want to note, so usually to fill a channel of this size, I would be needing around about 700, 750 mils of resin. Today I only mixed up, on our 2-to-1 ratio cup, I basically mixed up what was close to 300 mils of resin. So I've actually used a little under half of what I would usually use to fill this channel with my new batch of resin by just using old pieces of resin and filling that area in. So it can work out quite economical, and you don't have to waste your resin. I do get asked this all the time, what do you do with the leftovers? Well, this is it. So once we get it cured, I'm going to demold this board and then I'm going to sand it back, so you'll be able to see the end result of this in a few days. It's been a couple of days and we have a completed board. So I'll run you through the steps that I took to get to this stage, but I'm pretty happy with the outcome. It really looks like an abstract art board, and the back side gives you this real sort of subtle artistic look as well, with some of the pieces that had just come through from the bottom side. So technically this board could be used either side. But if you remember where we left it, we had a lot of sharp bits of resin sticking out the top of it. So I actually had to get my orbital sander and hit it hard with starting at 40 grit. So basically when I was sanding down those bits, because they were quite sharp and pointy, I went at it on an angle with my sander just to take most of that down until I got it flat enough to put my sander back down flat. So I did most of the work on 40 grit sandpaper to get it down and get those chunks level to the surface of the timber. Then I worked my way back through the grid. So then we went to 80 grit, then 120 grit, then I went to 240 grit, 320 grit, and then went 400 and 500. And the reason I went up to 500 grit is because I just wanted a little bit more clarity through the resin river here, because I was coating it in a satin finish, matte finish, sorry. And that's with our tung oil I've coated it with, because I wanted to keep it very natural. The tung oil gives me water repellency and gives it that natural look. So that was what I went through to get the board to this level. It was pretty easy, but we have a really nice outcome here. So guys, if you have any leftover resin, don't throw it away, cut it up, use it as an infill. And even if you didn't want to see this effect, you could probably put it in lower layers and then cover over the top of it. So either way, it works as an infill, so you don't waste your resin. But any questions, leave them in the comments below, and make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time, guys.